Good morning, everyone. Glad to be here. So we've got a lot of problems simultaneously, and that's most tree fruit, right? You don't get hit with just one, and we don't have unlimited money. So profit is the goal. You've got Asian citrus psyllid, leaf miner, diaprepes. So what I'm going to try to do is talk about how we can stack tools to get the greatest bang out of your buck. And we can think of the pathogen that causes greening as a pest. So, there's more. There's mites, but these are kind of the four that I will talk about in trying to create a system. So what are the tools that we have? Of course, we've got insecticides, and they're still a great tool. We're trying to come up with all these alternatives, but these are never going to go away. They're since the 1950s have been a tremendously important tool. Now, this was the typical spray program for about 8 years after citrus greening started. The downside is expensive, and we started to see resistance. And for a while, resistance went away, and it's kind of been coming back lately. So, what is resistance? You essentially select for a population that requires more pesticide. So this is a snapshot of the amount of pesticide that it took to kill an average population of psyllids from various locations throughout Florida in 2015. And we'd done this kind of survey since 2008. And basically what it shows you is for a few modes of action, we got these ratios that were outlandish. It took 2,000-fold more insecticide on average to kill psyllids in 2015 with thiamethoxam, which is like Octara, or platinum, which is a neonicotinoid. So we saw resistance, and it was in specific areas of Florida. So this can pop up in a very specific area. Now, the good thing about resistance is it comes with a large cost to the fitness of the individual that's resistant, right? Because resistant individuals are mutants. Within each population, there's a few mutants. Let's say this room is a population, I'm probably the mutant, or at least I'll take responsibility for that. You apply pesticide, right? Usually the mutants don't survive very well. They're kind of sickly. But once you apply the pesticide, suddenly the mutants have an advantage because they're more resilient to the pesticide. So you select for those mutants. If you keep changing the population, you take the pesticide away, and the mutants are at a disadvantage and they slowly die off. That's why there's only a few of them in a normal population. So if you get resistance, if you spray, let's say, an organic Danitol, and you're not killing psyllids, you could call my laboratory. We'll come to your location, we'll collect psyllids, and we'll test them. And we'll do a battery of insecticides, and we'll figure out which one they're resistant to, and then we can suggest a rotation, basically a mode of action rotation. You don't want to start with the one they're resistant to, right? You start with a different one, and every essentially 4 weeks is about a generation, and it takes. When you get to like 2,000-fold resistance, like happened in this location, the thiamethoxam in 2015, it takes about 20 weeks to bring that population back to a susceptible state. You got to rotate 5 modes of action, and you got to make sure all those mutants are gone, and that the normal genotype sort of resumes, and you've got a susceptible population again, and you can continue rotating. Now, usually this happens if you don't rotate in the first place, but it can happen just because we were using so much insecticide, right? So this is one strategy, but that's just one strategy, right? Maybe we can change the mindset that we use these tools so we don't cause resistance in the first place, right? Because we were really spraying. Sprays were really scheduled based on an interaction of how long the pesticide worked, and how expensive it was, So that's how we made our decision to do about 12 sprays per year in Florida. And that's not because the sprays worked perfectly for 4 weeks. In Brazil, where the sprays were cheaper, they realized, oh shoot, those psyllids start coming back at the end of the week. I spray on Monday, I start seeing them again on Friday. So they were spraying 52 times a year there, right? So maybe we can change that mindset and get off this pesticide treadmill and instead shift the management away from the objective of eradication, which is unlikely to be achievable right now in Florida, towards more of preserving tree health and longevity, right? So now I'm going to take a bunch of data that I published in a paper and present it in a totally different way without any numbers. So this is based on data from papers. So if you look at the level of psyllid population suppression, that's there on the x-axis. And this is what the trees look like a year after they were infected with HLB. These were about 6 to 8 year old trees. These were in Texas, and they didn't have greening a year ago. But we're going to look at them now, a year later, right? So this is a tree a year after it was infected with the bacterium that causes greening, with no psyllid control, with psyllids just able to just go nuts on it, right? And it looks pretty near death, right? Now, that's all the way at the 0 psyllid suppression end of that spectrum. Now, if you go on the other side of the spectrum and you got 100% psyllid control, no psyllids, 100% control. Basically, these trees were bagged in a IPC and were just nothing, right? It's a tree with greening after a year. If you looked, I don't have it here in the figure. It's got fewer leaves maybe, and some you could see through it. A tree without greening looked a little better. Now, let's look at what 12 sprays every 4 weeks achieves. It doesn't really look that much worse than the 100% control, just with 12 sprays. Now, we also measured the defenses that Brandon was talking about in these trees. And, well, before I even get there, I want to kind of, I didn't get to the culmination. So that's 12 sprays every 4 weeks. And we've seen that we can achieve that with 3 to 4 sprays to prevent key population peaks. So you want to prevent those key population peaks that weaken the tree. Now, if you look at tree defense, the defenses are boosted in the one that has greening. They're boosted. That tree's trying to defend itself against the bacteria, like my immune system right now is trying to defend itself, whatever Ebola I've managed to catch. Now, the ones in the middle have even a greater boost of defenses, much greater boost of defense we found. And I suspect it's because they're getting that combo of greening and they're getting psyllids now and again. Because the psyllids we found in the greening turn on the same immune defenses. Now, what happens to those trees at the end that don't get any psyllid control? At 270 days, we found after 270 days of consistent psyllid pressure, those defenses just shut down completely. The tree just can't handle it anymore, and the defenses shut down. And I think that's why the tree just eventually succumbs. So taking this as it's kind of the baseline, what I suggest is if we're going to use a calendar and be on that treadmill, we remember to spray a pyrethroid at bud break. Figure out when there's bud break at the, like January. Thank you. And spray something like a pyrethroid or an organophosphate. And then look at those flush. Watch those flush. If psyllids come back to those flush even after that bud break spray, then rotate another big hammer. If you sprayed a pyrethroid, then rotate an OP or vice versa. Do the big hammers in the wintertime. And then in the summer, consider something softer, but consider also getting the peaks that keep that tree healthy. And tap sampling, this is the Koreshian Stanley tap sampling method. After years of trying stuff, this is what works the best. Not any traps, any nothing. The tap sampling is the best way to go. And when the trees are really sickly, I go conservatively, 0.2 psyllids per tap. Tap 10 trees, and if you got 0.2 psyllids, that's too many. If the trees are healthy, if they're producing, if you're getting 100, maybe 80 to 100 fruit per box or something, I'm considering pretty healthy. You can get away with 1 psyllid per tap. And then spray when you reach that threshold. Let the psyllids tell you when they're too many, and that's when you spray. And the idea here is to minimize stress to trees, not to eradicate psyllids. Now, if leaf miners are a problem, then you can use products that kill them both. In the IFAS guidelines, the book we put out each year, it gives a nice overview of products that kill both leaf miner and psyllids. These are products that are great for leaf miner. Xrel, Agriflex, Micromite, Delegate, Agromech, Intrepid. All of these are tools you can use for leaf miner as well as the neonicotinoids. And if it's during a time when you're trying to also control psyllids, you want to use, get multiple birds with one stone. So this is a way you can reduce. I wouldn't do a leaf miner spray that's not going to clean up psyllids or vice versa. Try to get them both if you can. But you also gotta look at where you are in terms of the flush cycle if you're going to get leaf miner control. I don't know how many times I've had somebody take me out to their grove, show me mature expanded leaves filled with mines and saying, oh, what should I spray? It's too late then. You've got a mature, almost hardening off leaf. It's full of mines. It's way too late. You got to spray between 13 and 30 days of bud break. That little larva's got to be in there. It can't be. You're trying to kill it before it grows. The leaf miner products prevent the leaf miner from growing. So if it's already ready to turn into a pupa and become a moth, it's way too late. So you got to hit them well before those leaves are expanded and have a bunch of mines in them. So 30 days after bud break, that's too late. Now, if we're stacking multiple tools, exclusion works great. You've got IPCs. Think about these for your young trees. These are fantastic tools, and you can get away. Now, of course, some of these solutions create other problems, and we've had the problem of potentially having secondary pests underneath the IPCs. And here's Fernando with a new technology that has a different kind of mesh that's insecticide impregnated. We're looking at that potentially to kill off the mealybugs inside. But these are great tools, and that can be stacked onto their use, and they work for multiple pests. Diaprepes are going to be reduced if you've got IPCs on there, and we've gone and done the research, and sure enough, and Fernando has these reduce other pests, so you get multi-pest benefit. I got 5 minutes left. I got it. So we're looking at these soil fabrics. In addition, where research has been done, you can decrease diaprepes by putting these soil fabrics out by 92%. So we've got an experiment that CRDF funded to look at this. Now, the problem with these fabrics, they work great against diaprepes, but they're quite expensive. For 242 trees, you see $1,500 investment. So we're going to look at the economics of this and hopefully determine whether Larry Duncan is part of this team, is leading this team, and we'll figure out if this is profitable. But the results in terms of the efficacy are really encouraging so far. So the problem with diaprepes is you got to control them both on the tree and in the root zone. And a lot of the psyllid sprays can have an effect on the diaprepes in the root zone, but it's the ones that are in the soil that really that's the difficult time to get them. You could see what they do to young seedlings in a laboratory setting, and entomopathogenic nematodes just still remain the best way of controlling them. If you can get your hands on Nemesis R from BASF, that's really the best product. We've been looking at soil applied BTs, and they just don't work as well as the EPNs. Even when combining them, I mean, you might as well just use the EPNs alone. And of course, then there's antibiotics. And I want to show you some new data here. So you apply antibiotics to the tree, right? You inject them, and you get up to 150 days of lower bacterial titer. So the key here is you don't cure the tree. The tree's not cured. You knock down the bacterial population in the tree, and it slowly comes back over time. The antibiotics gone much faster. The bacterial titer kind of slowly goes back up. But acquisition by the psyllid is reduced significantly up to 60 and even up to 90 days after they were treated. And we have another CRDF funded project where we're looking at resistance, but also assessing the prevalence of sea loss in the field. And we just have some beginning data trickling out. And some of the most recent data from a December data collection where we looked at non-injected grows versus OTC injected grows, and that we had a reduction in infected psyllids from 93% to 60%. So that was a pretty good trend. In places where there was OTC, the psyllids had less bacteria, which is something good for the future. And of course, you get better yield so another tool to stack. So these are my conclusions, which basically reiterate what I said, but I'm over time, so I'm not gonna read these out. But broad spectrum insecticides at 2 minutes I got. Broad spectrum insecticides at bud break. Monitor to inform spray decisions rather than just go on a calendar. Exclusion helps. You got if you put IPCs on, you're getting a benefit for psyllids and diaprepes. So that's great. EPNs are the best tools for diaprepes in the soil. Trunk injected OTC decreases the sea loss pathogen, not only levels in the field, but transmission, and increases yield. The improves decreases there. The second to last, that's a typo. I should have caught that. Sorry. So combine tactics to address your specific problems. All right, that's all I have. And I'd be happy to take questions.